All right, good morning. Good morning, everybody. If you would please take your seats, we'll get started. We've got a busy day today, and so glad you're here. So I know many of you have come from far across this country, so thank you so much for all your travel. We've got friends from San Antonio, friends from California, friends from Seattle. We've got really just many friends across the country. And so in some ways, this is actually just a great celebration this time of year. And we couldn't be more excited to have you here, but also to have an action-packed day of our speakers here, and certainly our most honorable speaker, our keynote speaker, the Secretary, Chris Wright. So I just wanted to welcome you. My name is Drew Bond, and I am the CEO of C3 Solutions. Allow me, if I could, just to set the stage a little bit before we introduce Secretary Wright. So many of you have been a part of C3 Solutions from our beginning in 2020, and we couldn't thank you enough. And so I just wanted to say thank you. Really, our partners, our donors, our friends have allowed us to be an organization that has really become a resource for members of Congress and the administration, and we believe is helping to change the narrative and the policies around climate and energy and the environment in a really important way. So working together, we really have changed the narrative and the policy approach on energy, climate, and the environment. What was once all about gloom and doom, top-down and energy scarcity, is now all about optimism, bottom-up, and energy abundance. Republicans, conservatives, libertarians, the center-right largely have embraced a leadership role in reducing emissions from a position of strength. The agenda is no longer about subtracting and dividing to get an unachievable goal of net zero that plays into the hands of China at the expense of American energy security. The agenda is now about adding and multiplying, strengthening American energy security with abundant, affordable, reliable energy that is the cleanest in the world. You might say that we've moved from being net zero focused to being net abundance focused. American innovation is rising to the challenge like never before because we were able to address these challenges like energy demand from data centers and AI. So this is why we're here today. This is why you are here today. To listen, to learn, to be challenged and challenged, to build on the momentum that our country and world need most right now. So my call to you is that you're not here to be a passive bystander. You're here because you're a leader. You're a leader in your field: technology, policy, investment, business, marketing, communications, international. We have friends here from Paraguay. And many of you across multiple fields. So let's work together to accelerate American energy leadership for the sake of people and the planet. So I want to give you a quick glance of today's agenda. We're going to cover a lot of ground, as I mentioned, before we kick off the day with Secretary Wright. He will give us his vision on energy abundance and innovation and security. He's going to take some questions, so get ready. And then we'll move into lunch, a dessert discussion on how to best address energy poverty. We'll have the privilege of hearing from Representatives Pfluger and Malloy about permitting reform. And then later this afternoon, we'll dive into the innovation ecosystem, energy for AI, and finish the day strong on addition and multiplication for American energy dominance. So it's an action-packed day. Buckle up. We're so glad you're here. And before I introduce our speaker, I wanted just to give a special thanks to our sponsors. We couldn't have done it without you, our sponsors and speakers. And so if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to embarrass you for a second. If you would stand when I call your organization's name. And all of you should have one of these at your table. It's a snapshot of the agenda today. And on the back are our sponsors. So stand together. If you would please stand. Howard Energy Partners, Deploy US, Ham Institute for American Energy, Charles S. Mott Foundation, ClearPath, the Clean Energy Buyers Association, Arnold Ventures, Fermi America, Emerson Collective, Amazon, Pickering Energy Partners, Conserve America, Van Ness Feldman, and Energy Infrastructure Alliance Forum. If you would please join me in giving them a round of applause. We couldn't have done this without you. So with that, I wanted to give a bit of maybe a non-traditional introduction to a speaker who needs no introduction. When I first met Chris, now the Secretary of Energy, it was back in 2022, and it was clear that he was an enthusiastic energy entrepreneur with a passion for people. I recall sitting in his office in Colorado and talking about our shared passion for helping people rise out of poverty with abundant, affordable, reliable energy that is clean as practically possible. We talked about how economic freedom leads to the cleanest environments, and he agreed to write a foreword for our 2023 Free Economies, Our Clean Economies report. And so you'll see the foreword written here and a QR code to our most recent report. We also talked about how the narrative and the solutions around climate had been co-opted by the far left extremists, and that we really needed to flip the script from top down to bottom up. Little did I know that Chris would become our next Secretary of Energy. In fact, when President Trump was declared winner, I got a phone call from my friend Mike Howard, and Mike said, "Hey, you're a DC insider. Who do you think is going to be the next Secretary of Energy?" And I said, "Well, I'm pretty sure it's not going to be anybody that's being named right now in the media. I don't actually have any idea who it's going to be. I'm guessing that President Trump is going to pick a governor." But then I said, "Mike, I think we need somebody who really understands business, who understands technology and also understands energy. We need someone committed to free markets and technology and it being a neutral approach, bottom up to energy." I told Mike literally that we needed someone like Chris. I wasn't the first person to think that or say that, so I don't say that to say I was the smartest guy in the room or in DC at the time. There was a chorus of energy leaders who had been saying that long before Mike and I had that conversation. So with that, please allow me to just welcome our Secretary of Energy, the 17th Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright. We couldn't be more blessed to have you. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Great to be here. And I'll be brief with remarks because I think question and answer is always more entertaining and more fun. But I love to sit in a room of people that are passionate about energy. And you traveled from all around to be here to discuss and dialogue energy. That's awesome, and that warms my heart. It has been a motivator for me since I was the age of Mike Howard's son, who's sitting there. At a very young age, I got intrigued by energy and what powered the sun and the stars and how that works, how that rolls into human conditions and opportunities. And so I've been all in on energy all my life. And I'll summarize that by saying, look, there's about 1 billion people that live like us, that wear fancy clothes and travel to conferences, and on cold days like today, just turn up our thermostats, and when it's hot, we just turn on our air conditioners. It's a pretty awesome lifestyle, impossible and unimaginable throughout all of human history. But today there's 7 billion people that don't have all those opportunities, and of course they want those opportunities. Obvious conclusion there, we need massively more energy. You'll hear more from Mike and the discussion in energy poverty. We also have millions of easily preventable deaths, if not for a little bit additional energy to people that are least fortunate in the world. So to me, there's a pretty obvious conclusion. The world needs massively more energy. Yet we had a previous administration that was all about energy subtraction. We got to stop this, we got to stop that, we got to stop this, but we're going to replace it all eventually with stuff, of course, that only is a very small subset of energy called the electricity sector. And there it doesn't work all the time, and it turns out it's really expensive. Like, that was just a catastrophically bad plan. So I was thrilled when President Trump got elected. I was almost as surprised as Drew when I got a phone call to come work on energy. But I was thrilled to do it because President Trump, I mean, he's an East Coast real estate developer. He's not a lifelong energy nerd like me, but he knows in his bones instinctually that energy is central to human well-being, energy is central to economic and national power, and that the policy that made sense for the United States was more energy. My whole life, everyone said we want energy independence, energy independence. And most of my life, we continued to just grow our imports and move away from energy independence, which never existed in my lifetime. We never produced as much energy as we consumed in my lifetime until relatively recently. But to President Trump, that's not enough. That's not enough. We got to be dominant. And people say, what does that mean? And dominant means producing so much energy that you push down the price of energy, which makes everyone be able to pay their bills easier, raises the standard of living, particularly of lower wage workers, and that gives us so much energy that we can export it massively. We've got allies all around the world that count on foes and dangerous nations for their energy supplies. His vision was simple. If we produce so much energy in all different forms, we can be that secure supplier of energy to our allies around the world. We can drive reshoring of manufacturing to our country, increasing living standards by both lowering cost to pay bills and by businesses more competitive in the United States than anywhere else in the world. Pretty common sense agenda. And it's an honor to be here, and we should start the dialogue with Drew. When questions come, ask me absolutely anything you want. I'm very against any scripted answers or scripted questions. That's just not my style. I don't know Drew's questions, but whatever they are, I'm happy to engage with them. But I loved his story. I remember meeting him. I wasn't sure if it was 3 years ago or 4 years ago, but yeah, we connected right away. People who loved freedom, believed in markets. I also loved how he said, energy, climate, and the environment. 3 things. I have been a lifelong outdoor mountain climber, adventurer, passionate environmentalist in the traditional sense of the word, meaning I care about clean air, clean water, species preservation, wildlife preservation. These are awesome luxuries of wealthy societies. I had to resign from my environmental group board when I accepted this position. A free market group in Bozeman called the Property Environment Research Center. How do we use market mechanisms to drive awesome outcomes? So, and one of my many frustrations with the climate movement or climate mania has been it's just taken all the oxygen out of the room for all the other traditional environmental causes and displaced them all in sort of a hapless, naive attempt to address a real problem. So I'm happy to talk about the real problem, but most of what you hear about climate change is both entirely political and almost entirely nonsense. But it is indeed a real issue, and there are real and sincere efforts to look how to continue to drive decarbonization of our energy system. All right, Drew, look forward to the dialogue. Thanks everyone for being here.
All right, we got our mics on. Everybody hear me okay? Yeah, okay, that's better. Now I can hear myself. So first of all, I want to say apologies for misrepresenting this panel. It says fireside chat, and on a day like today, we actually need a fire. And we've got no fire. We got flowers. Anyway, so I want to dive into this question or the whole issue around energy affordability because the Washington Post recently said that with this administration, climate is out, and now it's all about energy affordability. And so talk a little bit about how this administration is approaching not only climate but affordability. And as you mentioned, I mean, all of these issues, energy, climate, and the environment, are so interconnected.
Yes, I think for this administration, and it's certainly a big issue in the election, was we had a 4-year period in the Biden administration of pretty significant inflation. And inflation is never good for politicians. Never good for politicians. And people were particularly upset about energy inflation, price of gasoline. Electricity prices in real terms have declined for over a century. And yet we had a roughly average of 30% increase in the price of electricity in a 4-year administration. Americans wildly frustrated about that. Because it's not just makes it more expensive to pay your bills, but if you make energy so expensive, you push energy and jobs offshore and they leave as well. It's been, and I know we've discussed it, it's amazing to me that the United Kingdom and Germany just continued down a road as these early industrial powerhouses, birthplaces of the Industrial Revolution, just drove all their industry out of their country. You close a modern natural gas-powered factory in the United Kingdom or Germany, and it moves to Asia, and it's a coal-powered factory, and then the goods are loaded on a diesel-powered ship, and it comes back here, and that's a climate policy? I mean, to me, that stuff's just insane. And we saw that happen for 20 years. So why the US would jump on that bandwagon and head down that road, I think we're crazy. And I think Americans are just a little bit more sensible. So we saw an earlier and sooner pushback against that. I would also say it's ineffective. It's not climate versus affordability. Everywhere that's gone that way, California, New York, Massachusetts, blue states in this country that have had the most expensive electricity and the fastest rise in electricity, they produce less electricity today than they did in 2019. So when you make electricity expensive, it's not, oh, well, at least it's reducing greenhouse gas. It's just people can't afford to buy as much energy, so they buy less, and businesses leave. The states in this United States that have had the fastest growth in electricity production and therefore electricity demand have had flat to declining prices. In fact, if you look at all the red states run by Republican states across the country, electricity prices over the last 5 years have risen well below the rate of inflation. They've increased in nominal terms, but not in real terms. If you look at the blue states, they've increased at twice the rate of inflation. So I would say expensive energy is a choice. It's not like something imposed, it's not something terrible. It's politicians and regulator are choosing, in my mind, to make very bad trade-offs. So our goal is we want to drive down those prices, increase opportunities for Americans, and reshore industry here.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, because I know you make your point about red and blue states not as necessarily a political point, but just a reality point. It's a common sense, and frankly, if you see the differences between the policy approaches, it's not necessarily you're trying to play politics. It's just what it is.
Yeah, Andrew, let me elaborate on that. In the stuff I've written about energy, which I've done for a while, and these larger reports called Bettering Human Lives that cover a lot of things, there is no politics in there. There's no politics in there at all. In fact, one of my lifelong goals, I always said, was to get the politics out of energy. Energy is infrastructure. It's the basic infrastructure that enables everything else in the world to happen. I don't want politics and energy, just common sense. I say energy should be thought of, when you think of energy, think of two things. Humans, right? The only reason we produce energy is to enhance the quality and opportunities of people's lives, and math. Energy should be about humans and math, but we forget that too much. And yes, certainly in recent history or my lifetime, it's been the Democrats that have just gotten way off track in energy policy. But I just want them to get on track. I don't want energy to be overly political. I could say that until 10 months ago. Now I'm a politician. But this is a temporary gig for me, and I'm very happy to do it because overall, the energy view and perspective of Republicans has just been massively better than Democrats. But my goal and the Trump administration goal is to fix the trajectory of energy in all 50 states for all Americans across the country.
So I want to turn to your agency, the Department of Energy, and specifically within DOE, you've got the Loan Program Office, and now you've really put in place this energy dominance financing program. And just last month, you commented, by far the biggest use of those dollars will be for nuclear power plants to get those first plants built. How do you see that program de-risking the first-of-a-kind nuclear technologies under your leadership in the administration?
Nuclear is this tremendous technology. First, and maybe more controversially, right, we had this rushed effort during World War II to develop an atomic bomb. Atomic bombs are horrifying and terrible, but I think their net impact on the world has been overwhelmingly awesome. In all of our lifetime, since in the atomic age, by far the lowest risk of violent death ever. The United States developing that bomb in a rushed effort brought World War II to an earlier than otherwise close, and I believe a far less deadlier close as well. And then it established this era where the US was the dominant military, economic, and cultural power. That's been a pretty good. 80 years or so since that age. We also brought on a new industry for generating energy, the most important industry in the world. From the mid-50s to the mid-70s, we designed, permitted, constructed over 100 nuclear reactors. Some of them were still in construction at that time. Then we created the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and in the last 45 years, we built 2. So there was kind of a pivot there, and it wasn't a good pivot. Rapidly up to over 20% of US electricity, and then this industry got smothered. I think it got smothered by regulation, it got smothered by this politics and social and ability to more mass communicate. It's easier to sell fear than reassurance. It's easier to sell fear than uplift. And so we smothered this industry early on. The industry itself deserves some of the fault as well, but as a free market capitalist, we crushed that industry. So I am a believer that we will use government efforts to get it going again. Then it's got to run and play in the marketplace and hopefully bring a lot of energy out of the place. But in the one big beautiful bill where there was $1 trillion in the next 10 years of energy subsidies, I would have loved to have gotten rid of 900 billion of that trillion. We didn't get that far, but we got 550 billion of subsidies gone. I think that will be very helpful. But I was an advocate to keep the tax credits in, and they're in for 8 years. 8 years is plenty of time. We had 33 years of wind subsidies, that's way too long. 8 years from going forward here, if you start to construct a nuclear power plant or a next generation geothermal plant, you will receive those tax credits. Next generation geothermal is an emerging energy technology. Let's get those things going. But nuclear is large in scale. It has the key things to be a successful energy technology: high energy density, small amount of land, small amount of materials, huge amount of energy. It works, whether the wind is blowing or the sun is shining. I mean, it's just insane to think you're gonna have a critical system that depends on the clouds or the sun setting. I mean, that's just crazy. No subsidies, no math, no denying of physics are ever gonna make those meaningful parts of the global energy system. The other thing nuclear has that's huge is it's not just electricity. Only 20% of global primary energy is delivered via electricity wires. That's a very important and our highest value energy sources, but it's just one subset. Isn't even the most important part of the energy sector. The most important part of the energy sector is manufacturing. Almost half of global energy is used to produce all the other things that allow you to have planes, trains, and automobiles, and electricity, and internet, and a conference room like this. And that key energy source in manufacturing is high temperature process heat. Without that energy source, you don't have all the other stuff. That is central. That does not come from electricity. That will never, in a meaningful sense, come from electricity. But nuclear can provide high temperature process heat. It doesn't today, but it can provide a lot of it, and I believe it will going forward. Today, it's just in the electricity sector. Last data point from a nerdy guy, nuclear was 6.5% of global energy at the year 2000. It's less than 5% today. We gotta get that industry back standing up and moving again. And then I think commercially and through innovation and through its own cost thing, it'll grow on its own. If you look at 1,000 years from now, what's gonna be a huge energy source in the world? Nuclear, fission, fusion, all that, but that's the long-term major energy source. It will not be the only energy source, but I think it'll be a growing player throughout the rest of our lives and our kids' lives and generations to come.
So that leads me to a question around permitting reform, because you can't talk about nuclear without talking about the red tape that has gotten in the way of our ability to build nuclear plants. And there's obviously a lot of encouragement around the capital being infused in nuclear companies, small modular, everything from micro technologies to larger 250 megawatt sizes to more like a gigawatt size. I think there's something like 80 companies with various technologies that are in the SMR space doing something that's quite encouraging around advancing the technology. But I just keep coming back to, if we can't get out of the way, are we actually going to be able to build these things? Permitting reform is being talked about in DC, as you know. We've talked about it forever. But if you had your pick of sort of what are the policies that would really move the needle from a permitting reform perspective around nuclear energy, and I think also that would have ripple effects throughout all the other technologies as well.
Yeah, it is across the board. And look, I'm an optimist by nature, but I think we are at a time where the chance of a real permitting reform bill is higher maybe than it's ever been. Same is true for nuclear. When I went through my Senate confirmation hearings, the majority of the Democrats are pro-nuclear. Almost all the Republicans are pro-nuclear. The arrival of data centers and then their need for energy, these massive construction projects, and the belief that, yeah, maybe we should reshore more manufacturing in our country, these are relatively bipartisan ideas, which is great. I think the idea for this policy back to common sense, pro-energy, I say common sense is contagious. It's catching on. And I think Democrats, they want to be able to build things in America as well again. So I think we've got a reasonable, it's still politics, so we've got a reasonable chance. I hope we can get a bipartisan permitting reform bill done that's broad-based, just quicker to get permits, more stable to get permits, easy, just lower risks to start planning to build things again. I can use one of them, NEPA, so the National Environmental Policy Act, passed in the 70s as a check. If you're going to build something and use federal dollars or it's large scale, you're going to touch federal lands, you've got to have reflected on what's the impact in the environment going to be. Great idea. We've got to think about this stuff. We care about that stuff. It got turned into something completely different. This is the weaponization, 10-year legal, stop anyone from building anything by suing them on NEPA. That's not what NEPA was about to begin with. So the Trump administration from the start, all the agencies, NEPA issuing agencies like ours, we issue NEPA permits, completely reformed our NEPA processes back to what was originally intended in the 70s, which is really like a check. Did you consider that? Did you summarize that? It's not a weaponization thing that means your project goes forward or not. Fortunately, in the same time frame we were doing what we were doing, we got that Supreme Court decision, unanimous Supreme Court decision, saying that the exact same thing. Yeah. NEPA was designed in this way. It's not used the way it's designed. So NEPA is a massive problem. Common sense around the Endangered Species Act is needed too. So there's a number of things that are being dialogued right now. I'll end with my summary of NRC reform. I say, what's our goal with the NRC? Our goal with the NRC is to have the NRC's focus safety, safety, and safety. That's what it's about. To have nuclear, we have to be confident and everybody comfortable we're doing everything we can for safety. The NRC of the last decades has been about bureaucracy, safety, and bureaucracy. Didn't do anything unsafe. Safety was still there, but it didn't do anything. We made it so cumbersome and so tricky that we didn't end up doing anything. You know, the safest thing you can do every day is never get out of your house, right? Never do anything. But that's not a life anyone wants to live. We got to make stuff happen. I believe an NRC that'll be efficient and practical, reduce the cost and speed of nuclear reactors, will be every bit as safe, I would say a little bit safer, because if you're just focused on safety, innovation happens. New nuclear reactors, if everything in the world goes wrong, they automatically shut themselves off. Existing reactors, you got to take some action to actively cool them. So nuclear has a great safety record looking backwards, and looking forward, it'll be even better.
So I want to leave time for questions, so I'll cut off one of my questions and leave that for the audience. My last question that I wanted to have you talk through is, you said, I think at the beginning of the year, perhaps when you were first confirmed, that you were going to visit every single national lab in the first year, which there's a lot of national labs. You've been traveling a lot. And so I'm just curious, tell us a little bit about that adventure, having visited all, 17 national labs?
17 national labs.
And like any surprises, what encouraged you the most about our national lab landscape and the technology innovation that's happening there?
Yeah, I love the national labs. I've done partnerships with national labs before in my business, although I've never actually stepped foot into a national lab until I got the new job. Now I've spent almost a full day at all 17 of them. And they're tremendous. These are the greatest Nobel Prize winning factories on the planet. Nobel Prize in physics this year, Nobel Prize in chemistry this year, work that was done at our labs of these scientists. As I was a kid, I wanted to be an astronomer, right? I wanted to work on fusion energy or astronomy or nuclear physics. That's stuff that's dominantly done in our national labs. Of course, they partner with our universities and great businesses around as well, but think of the anchor of physical sciences on the planet is done in these 17 national labs. And it's different in all the different labs. The whole construction of our nuclear weapons complex, there's a defense science part about them, birthplaces of artificial intelligence and high performance computing. I mean, they're germinating places for things that come out. They also do a lot of things, often they're sold as commercial, and they do lead to all these great commercial innovations, but they also do basic fundamental science. Where is people pondering what dark matter is, what dark energy is, how our cosmos works, the actual behavior, understanding of neutrinos. These are fundamental scientific questions. They're more philosophical today to understand how our world works, but who's going to fund that? Like, no business is going to fund that. No university has the funds or the long-term thing to do it. This is the stuff that, a limited government capitalist like myself, this is what our government needs to do and should do. And the track record of performance of our labs is just outstanding. 40,000 top engineers and scientists spread around our country working on these things. So it's inspiring, uplifting. It's unique American assets. No other country has anything close to it. But I'll tell you, China is rushing to build large, major labs to duplicate our national lab system. So I love them. And although I came into office wanting to shrink expenditures, right? We spend $1.30, $1.40 for every dollar we collect in taxes. That's horrible. That's terrible for our kids and our grandkids. So I come in wanting to shrink government expenditures and align those better. So my original budget for the national labs was like a 30 or 40% budget cut. I'm like, no, this is the one area that you don't want to cut. In fact, particularly, think of the time we're in right now. AI that was talked about when I went to college is finally hitting critical mass. It is going to change our economy, it's going to change our national defense, and it's going to change the rate of progress of scientific discovery. Quantum computing, fusion energy, awesome advances in materials, medical science. We're going to be at a new scientific golden age in the next 10 or 20 years. Incredibly exciting time. And labs are foundational to that. We want to double down. And of course, the labs have inefficient bureaucracy, so a lot of what we're doing is just getting rid of the waste and burden and overhead on them. So with even a flat budget, we're going to see a rapid growth in the pace of scientific discovery.
Great. All right. With that, I want to leave some time for questions. So I think we've got a first question back here. If you would identify yourself, Laura.
I will.
And, yeah.
Thank you, friend of Drew. Laura Lovelace, Mr. Secretary, thank you for joining us. First of all, thank you for refocusing the department on grid resilience, increasing capacity, and deregulation. Okay, first and foremost. This question is actually for one of my clients. They're building out 350 megawatts in Mississippi, power gen, natural gas. All that's good, base load, everything we want. Can you just help us to understand the administration's view on battery storage? Because they really want to add battery storage. They want to store the electrons for resilience. And do you see the administration's position on battery storage maybe changing over time once more capacity baseload is up and running? Can you just help us understand that a little more?
Oh, yeah.
Government support for battery storage, I should say. Obviously, if private equity is going to do it, they can do it. But
yeah, okay. So I would say, look, our administration, the whole religion around energy, we've thrown that out the door. It's about math. It's about what's the best way to grow our energy system, the affordability, the security, the quantity, all of that. So it isn't in all of the above. If you need a lot of subsidies to make electricity more expensive, we're not for that. But batteries are going to play an increasing role because people tell me, I get rid of these wind and solar subsidies. That's what's driving up electricity prices. We just need all the electrons we can on the grid. I'm like, that's not how the grid works. We have hundreds of gigawatts of spare capacity right now. It's all there. It's waiting there. If the clouds part and the sun comes out, all it means is existing generating assets turned down to accommodate that. The design of the electricity grid is fundamentally around one thing, which is to make sure the lights stay on, the hospitals run, the factories run at peak demand. That's when it matters. You can bring me power, electricity at peak demand. You grow the capacity of the grid. We can put new sources on. Batteries are helpful in that. They can take very low value electricity, which is most of the time, and shift it and turn it into high value electricity. So anything that helps increase the capacity of the grid, we're for. We have lots of support programs to develop critical minerals in this country, to bring battery technology and manufacturing to the United States. So yeah, batteries and energy storage in general are going to be increasingly important things, although they're often misunderstood as like, oh, they're going to fix it. Wind and solar they're not cheap today, but they will be cheap because we're just going to build a few more batteries. Today we can store 7 minutes of the US electricity grid in all the batteries across the country, including the ones in all the electric vehicles. When you get a peak demand now, which is increasingly the winter, you get a high pressure system moves in, it's very cold, which means the wind's not blowing. The peak demand's in the evening, which means the sun's not shining. And that sits there for 2, 3, or 4 days. 7 minutes of energy storage doesn't mean anything, compared to 100 hours of very high demand time. But if you can move some energy and of course, data centers have high frequency loads, battery can supply those. If you can take low value electricity and wait till peak demand, it's helpful. So it has a role to play.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. Next question on this side of the room, I guess. Yeah.
Hi. How do you do? Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Thanks for coming. Hi, Drew. Thanks, everyone, for being here and putting the conference together. Question about trust in America. America is probably taking a hit. If you can buy American, that's one thing. If you buy from Russia or China, you have a risk of your country being invaded or your supply being shut off. Expound a little bit more about the role of America, not only for LNG, but for the technologies to come.
Yes, so a lot of people hear America first and think America alone. And that is not the plan. That is not the plan. The plan is, how do we prioritize the interests of the American people? And to do that, of course, there is a push, and we want to reshore into the United States manufacturing, both for security. We count on adversaries for an amazing number of critically important things. And of course, we want to bring blue-collar jobs back in droves to this country. The last 30 or 40 years, for everyone in this room, highly educated people with skills and talents have been awesome. If you grew up in either a low-income, rough family in the city or rural America, they haven't been as great. So there is an economic goal to bring a lot of blue-collar jobs back to this country. But to really have security and technologies and supply chain and advancement, that takes way more than the United States. So we want to move dependencies on hostile nations to dependence on the United States or friendshoring. And the countries involved in friendshoring is a lot. And we want to grow and expand that. I will also say a thing. This is a dialogue that I had with President Trump both before the election and after the election. On immigration, President Trump's views are actually very aligned with mine have always been, which is that legal immigration is critical. America is the land of opportunity. We've been built by immigrants coming from all over the place. Our national labs, scientists, cutting edge stuff. We want America to be the land of opportunity. We want to be a magnet for people that are going to come here and make America a better place. So more legal immigration, but less illegal immigration, because it reduces criminality and it's not as economically beneficial. But trust in our relations around the world are central. And in a time of change, there's uncertainty right now. There's a lot of dialogues that have to happen and a lot of things that are being reset. But we need to reset them back into trusted partnerships with our allies and friends.
We had a question back here at the back table. Yep. Yeah, no. Yes. No, you just stood up, my friend with the beard. There you go. Yeah.
I didn't realize that was the back. Okay. Hi, Zach Coleman with Politico. Thank you for doing this. Wanted to ask about the DOE proposal on large load interconnections. Obviously, the administration has a huge emphasis on AI and bringing data center manufacturing back to America. I wanted to ask you, there are a lot of tech companies that are willing to spend a lot of money to get to the head of the queue to drive down costs on new tech. Is the regulated utility model as we know it today not fit for purpose to address some of these concerns?
So you're right, we're in a different place than we've been for electricity for decades. But the electricity grid is complicated. And so I don't think regulated utilities are going away tomorrow and all that. But a lot of the construction that's going to be done quickly is not going to be funded by utilities. You know, they're risk averse and their balance sheets are a little bit stressed and strained. We have to move fast. So there's going to be a lot of creative models where hyperscalers and other people fund the equity to build power plants. Debt will come from private markets, could come from our energy dominance financing office. And then a lot of those assets will be built and they may be turned over to utilities to run them afterwards. But we are in very active dialogue right now and investigation, Zach, on how best to do this. What do we need to change so we can get back in growth mode in electricity? We've nearly tripled US oil production in the last 15, 18 years, more than doubled US natural gas production, and we've only tweaked up our electricity production. It hasn't had the dynamism, it hasn't had the growth, hasn't had the benefits of huge volume and lower costs. And so yes, we need to figure out what structural changes we need to make to get some dynamism into the electricity markets.
So we're out of time. I'm going to take the liberty of one last question. You have...
You go.
Maybe, one more question from the yep, and then I've got one last question.
Yeah.
Hi, Secretary Wright. Chris Knight from Argus Media. There's reporting today that the U.S. is asking the EU to delay its methane rules for U.S. fuel exports until 2035. Can you confirm that that's something you guys are asking? And could you elaborate a bit on why you think that the U.S. shouldn't need to comply until 2035?
So methane from producing of oil and natural gas, like with any process, right? Some methane gas leaks out. And that's the subject of these rules. The United States industry as a whole has just massively reduced the methane intensity of their production. Incredible improvement from innovation or whatever, not driven by regulation at all, driven by investors, driven by companies, driven by customers. So innovation always beats regulation. And so we've had enormous progress this in the US, and then Europe passes a number of different, I could say CSDDD, the methane rule, CBAM, a series of regulations written not by innovators, not by businesses, but by, again, people that don't appreciate what climate change is and how to address it. So it's like a regulatory overreach. That also means for US businesses that are selling into Europe, the penalties apply to their behavior around the whole planet, and the fines apply to their business around the whole. It's extraterritorial regulation that will drive no positive environmental benefits, but will make it too legally risky for the US and other countries to sell natural gas into Europe, which would be both bad for US businesses, but far worse for European countries. They need natural gas. It is the largest source of electricity in Europe, by far the largest source of electricity in the United States. Globally, it's still coal. Globally, coal is the biggest source of electricity. Natural gas is number 2. In wealthy countries, natural gas is typically number 1. So yes, we want to be able to supply natural gas to Europe. We want Europe to be able to receive natural gas. And we need to do it in a practical way that'll benefit Europe and whatever. Just because it has the name, the methane rule, does that mean it's going to drive down methane emissions faster? Absolutely not. Does that mean it might drive energy prices up and reduce energy supply to Europe? Absolutely. So we are working every day with the Europeans right now to get a regulatory regime that allows trade between our countries so we can lower the cost of energy in Europe and they can see their electricity prices go down as well. But there are huge problems there, as you've identified one of them.
All right, last question, probably the toughest one. How are the Broncos going to do to finish the season? Are they going to win the Super Bowl?
Well, I'm an optimist, so I think we have a very real chance to win the Super Bowl. And I think it was a big day yesterday because Broncos have a great record, but there's understandable skepticism because we just barely win our games. It's not like we're blowing people out. So the belief was we play these strong teams, the Broncos are wilt. Well, we played the Packers yesterday, a great team, and we beat them in a great game. So sports are great because they're unifying for culture, great rivalries, but it's about sports. So I love ending with a sport question. So I'm an optimist. I'm not betting the house on it, but I'm an optimist that we're gonna have a good playoff run. But thank you for being in energy. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for being friends with my friend Drew, sitting right next to me.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks so much. Appreciate you.
You're the best, buddy.
Great. Anytime. All right, well, thank you, Mr. Secretary. What a great way to start the day. I think we could just end there, but we have too many more exciting speakers and too much more content to cover. So I think with that, actually, our next big thing on the agenda is lunch. Is that right, Maggie? Yep. So we're going to eat lunch, and so please enjoy. There's a buffet. Both sides are open. Get to know your table friends and make new friends, and then when it's time for dessert, we'll jump into another discussion. Thanks.